Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades.
Hello, people of the internet. It is I, Gas Mask and Hand Grenades here. I'm your host, Jeff, and I'm joined by not one, but two members of the band. Now, help me out here, guys. It's Rake, not Warake, right?
I mean, we leave that up to and anybody can pronounce it how they want. We usually just refer to it as wake, without
Oh,
an
Wake.
R.
Okay.
Yeah, but we go well if you say anything along those lines, we look in that direction.
Okay. Well, when you started, though, you were originally RAKE, right? Rake?
No, it was actually WAKE.
Oh, so it was
Yeah,
Wake.
yeah,
Okay. Was
yeah.
there other bands that were named that?
Yes, there was, and that
Okay.
was back in like 1996. And so we found out there was another band, and so one of the members was a little intoxicated and it was like, all right, and that just
I'll
kind of
just throw an R
stuck.
in there, right?
Uh-huh, yep. And that just kind of stuck. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best idea, but it is what it is. And 30 years later, I don't think we're gonna
Yeah.
change it now.
Kind of hard, kind of too late to kind of go back and
Yeah.
revisit that. But hey, so I'm joined by Brittany Fugate and John. You want to give me your last name? I'm sorry,
John Judkins.
Judkins. Okay,
Judkins, yeah.
cool. Nice to meet you guys, and we're here to talk about the fact that you guys have your first album, your sixth album, but it's your first album in quite a long time. Almost, I guess we're looking at close to 14 years. Is that right? 13 years.
Yeah.
So um, that's cool. It's called the. You want to tell us the title of the album?
It's the Return of Magic.
And that
Yeah.
comes out on the 14th on Relapse Records.
Yes.
And so I guess the first obvious question is it's a long gap between albums. I mean, typically, I come from the era of the 70s where an album, sometimes bands were putting out two albums a year sometimes. But as it's strange because as technology has grown, we've had longer and longer gaps between albums, but we generally don't see 13-year, 15-year gaps. Were you got what's the story there? And I assume a lot of it has to do with just adulting, probably.
Yeah.
Life kind of happening, and you guys aren't Metallica, so it's not the band isn't a business like a giant corporation like those guys are. So tell us a little bit about what was kind of going on there, Brittany, if you would. And I'm going to change the view here. I'll pull you over there like that. All right.
So in 2011, or I think it was probably around the end of 2010, our bass player, our longtime bass player, Reed Rayleigh, he had his first child. So he kind of took a break, and that's when John Judkins stepped in. He came, we'd known him since the 90s. He was, family member, honorary member as it was. So he stepped in and started playing bass for us. We did a European tour and a couple of small runs pushing the album that we had out at that time, Rest. And then during that time, I had my second child. And so then some of the other band members started having some children too. So after, 15, 20 years of playing music on the road and stuff, we kind of decided, we spent so much time building, this thing, this, all around the world, with our music, we never really kind of stopped and spent the time to build something at home. Uh, and so we just, days turn into weeks turn into months turn into years. And some our guitar players kind of both went their own ways. And then COVID happened, and
Right.
when COVID happened, like the world stops. And the daily grind of working and having children and all that stuff, it just like everything just kind of stops, and you realize what's really important to you. And we all came to the realization that playing music together was something that we really wanted to dedicate some time to doing. The thing is, we're all or nothing people, so we couldn't just, and the music kind of deserved our full attention, and we just, over those years, we weren't able to give it that. Everybody is in their own separate bands and stuff like that. So it's not like no one was playing music at all.
Right.
But we just didn't have the time that the music needed in order for us to work on Wake, that specific project. But like I said, after COVID happened, we decided, all right, we're going to dedicate some time to this. We realized that, our longtime guitar player, Christopher Graves, he wouldn't be able to play with us due to health issues. And that was kind of a major setback for us again,
Yeah.
because, us realizing that we had to move on without him was not easy. But John is an absolute amazing guitar player, and we always kind of wanted him on guitar anyway, even if it was just as a third guitar member. So uh, John moved over to guitar, and Reed, our longtime and irreplaceable bass player, Reed came back on bass, and then we tried out a couple different guitar players, and just like nothing really stuck. And then Jeff, who's our drummer, and he's one of the main writers in the band. He and mentioned, who's like, hey, I know this kid that I used to work with. And I say kid, he's like 30 years old, but that's still like 20 years younger than us.
Yes,
So
I know exactly what you mean. Trust me,
so
because I'm even almost 60, so I know exactly
right.
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, I know, he's a shredder, I think he'll work. And so he came to a band practice, and it was just me and Jeff, and it was great. He'd learned like 3 or 4 songs all on his own. He
Wow.
so it was amazing. And so we were like, okay, we actually can do this. Because at that time, John was living, and I think he was in Miami at that time. Reed was in Ohio. So with people being spread out all over the US, it just wasn't an easy process.
Sure.
But bringing Austin in, he's so dedicated to his craft that we knew it was possible to move forward, because we wouldn't have to spend like a week teaching him one song, because one song for us is like 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
we can't, the little bit amount of time that we get to spend together, we can't use that teaching people songs. And so what Austin brought to the table was a level of ease, that like we knew that if we were like, okay, learn this, by the time John flew in, Reed flies in, whatever, we would be able to just pick up exactly where we left off. And so with that last piece of the puzzle, we were able to go ahead and set down a date for recording the record. And what we did is we brought in Sanford Parker. He's the one who's done a lot of our other records. And that
Perfect.
again was just another, level of ease for us, because, we've known Sanford for more years than we haven't. And so having him come to us and come to Little Rock, we could just go take over a studio. And we knew, with our abilities and what his abilities are, that we'd be able to produce something that we were all really happy with. So that's the
The
13 years in a nutshell.
13 years in a nutshell. Yeah. I was thinking about this as I was listening to this last night and today, and kind of absorbing it, and I was like, Arkansas, not exactly a hotbed of metal. Not exactly. I mean, I think I can name 2 bands. I know I can name Paul Bear, obviously. And going back, way back into the rock of the 70s, there was Black Oak, Arkansas, I believe, weren't they from that area?
Yeah, they're from Black Oak, Arkansas.
Right. Well, there you go. Duh. There you go. And I'll show you how ignorant I
Yep.
am of Arkansas. I've only been there one
No.
time, kind of crossing through. But and actually, there's a little crossover to Black Oak, Arkansas, that we'll get to in a minute here. But what? So you guys began in what, 95, 96
Yeah.
era? How? Well, first of all, give me a little bit of the thumbnail, the history. And John, I'll get to you in a minute here, I promise. You started in that mid 90s period, and were you all locals at that point in time, I'm gathering?
Yeah, we are. Most of us had went to school together. And so yeah, we were all young teenagers, and then in our early 20s. And we just found companionship in our, essentially, it started off as just like playing music was just your outlet, for dealing with the amount of oppression and stuff that comes with living in the South.
Right.
And so initially it was just we needed that outlet, and it was just the music was essentially just our collective response to poverty and oppression.
Right.
And uh and then from there, we grew as not only as humans but as musicians as well. um but
Well, what were some of the like the you know early Brittany? I gather you're probably in your late 40s, early 50s, somewhere in that range.
in 40s, yeah.
Okay, so what are you guys listening to collectively at that point in time that kind of coalesce into creating what Wake becomes?
Well, we've always had very diverse music tastes. Like Jeff, our drummer. He's always been. At that time, it was Slayer, of course, was his favorite band. For me, I'm more of like a prog '70s person.
Okay, right.
Like Bang, King Crimson, Atomic Rooster, things like that are my favorite bands.
Oh, nice.
And then you've got Reed and Chris Terry, who are just overall just music fans of all genres of music. So very diverse tastes. For me personally, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I didn't have access to like MTV and things like that. So for me, finding new music meant going to a record store and digging through bins and
Hmm.
looking at artwork, and then finding artwork that through the dollar bins. And I'd be like, okay, and this is great. I'll take it home, And I even remember when I guess it was about 14, I found a King Crimson record at a garage sale for 25 cents. And Chris Terry came over and he saw it and he was just, what is this? Like,
Which
because
one
the
was it?
artwork, and the Court of the Crimson
What the
King.
Crimson King?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
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 gotcha.
and the artwork, is like it was great. So and then of course I remember when we finally found a turntable to put it on, and we were just like, oh my
All
God,
that Mellotron, man.
yes, yes, I
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I love the Mellotron today. It's
Oh,
on our
oh
record.
yeah. I'm a prog
But
nerd too. I mean, Rush.
yeah,
Rush is my favorite band. Will always be my favorite band until the minute I die. Huge Yes fan. That's
yeah,
the era that I came up in listening to. Early Genesis. Peter
yeah.
Gabriel era Genesis, stuff like that. So totally
Yeah,
get it.
that's a huge influence on most of the members of our band.
But
Like
the
in
interesting,
that whole genre.
but the interesting thing is, you kind of would know it, but you wouldn't know it if you don't know it, if you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
the thing that grabbed me about you guys, John, I'm going to bring you up here, get you involved here, sir. The thing that kind of grabs me about this particular album, and like I said, I only had a chance to listen to Rest, the last album, so I wasn't able to dig super deep back into the catalog, but there, it was not what I was going. It was not what I was expecting. Like when I read the bio, I'm like, okay. And I'll be blunt with you, I'm not the biggest sludge fan, but I don't necessarily think that's a great. I don't think that's a great genre description for you guys because it's there. There's elements of it. I hear some Mastodon. I hear some I Hate God. I hear some COC, but not really like it's not real coalesced. There's a lot more of a progressive nature to what you guys are doing. Hence the long tracks, hence the kind of ebb and flow of the songs. They're not just all out pummeling, beat your brains in with a jackhammer type stuff. There's a lot of ebb and flow. John, are you, with the exception of the new guitar player who is what's his name again, Brittany? I'm sorry, Chris
Austin.
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 Okay,
Mhm.
John, you're the most recent guy into the band, into the fold.
Hmm.
And were
Yeah.
you guys knew each other? Brittany said so. Like when you stepped into this, like, did you have a real understanding of what the band's mission statement was musically, and was it something that you were pretty well versed in? And like, how would you how would you two guys talk about your music other than the obvious thing? Well, it's wake music. You know, I mean, every band wants to say it's this, but every band is a coalescence of the various influences that come in that they've been listening to. What would you kind of categorize yourself as, and how deeply immersed in the music were you before you came in?
Yeah, the first time I saw Wake, I'm from a really small town in Tennessee called McMinnville, and I was also in like a smaller unincorporated town called Centertown. So it's the same sort of thing as you didn't have much, but what you heard when you heard something, you were like, "What is this? I need to figure out as much as I can about this." Whether it be like hearing Ride the Lightning for the first time and being like, "What is this?" Or Rain in Blood or something. But when I first saw Wake, I was in a band. I was about 15 or 16 years old, and we would travel from McMinnville, Tennessee, up to Nashville to play this all ages venue. And it was about a 2 hour.
Uh-oh,
Oops.
we lost him. He froze up. John, you froze up
Oh,
for a minute there. You there?
am I back?
There you
There
are.
you go.
You're back.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
back.
All right. All right. Sorry. So I don't know where you cut off, but I was in a death metal band and we were sharing the stage with Wake in like 95, 96. And at that time, from what you could get, about as heavy that I got was like straightforward was Pantera, Slayer, Metallica.
Sure.
And Wake at this time, it was without an R, it was just Wake. And I remember watching and standing in front of the stage, and CT was just screaming like these declarations into the sky about sending messages out to the insects so they could continue to communicate when the earth is covered in like an atomic bomb. The insects are still around and they're communicating with each other and all this. And I was like, what is going on here? And at that point, that was like a moment for me when it's kind of broke my brain a little bit, because not only was it like this cacophony of like somewhat insanity, it was just very musical at the time too. It was still musical.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a country music household. My mom was a singer songwriter, and it was always Randy Travis or George Jones, all these harmonies, all this stuff was just going.
We got that Miami internet connection apparently.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll be back.
Bummer. Okay, John, we'll come back to you in a minute here. I promise. When you maybe what you might want to try to do, John, if you can still hear me, is go out and come back in. I'll bring you back in and see if that resolves things there a little bit. I wanted to point out my buddy Nick is here. Nick has Thralls of Metal, which is one of the bigger metal YouTube channels out there. He's going to be reviewing the album, I guess, this week, maybe later this week or early next week, which is cool. He gets a lot of traffic over there, so cool to see you here, Nick. He's aware of your earlier stuff. There you go. So, when you decided to, was it a joint sort of like, who made the phone call? Who was the person that said, "Hey, let's do something here again. Let's try to rekindle this thing"? Or was it, had you guys, I imagine you've all been in contact at various points in times throughout your life the last
Yeah.
decade plus, but like, who was the catalyst that said, "Hey, let's do this. Let's put some material together again. We have something to say"?
Well, me, CT, and Jeff, we all live really close together. And we're always really close.
Mm-hmm.
CT was always a never-ending force of, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. That was,
The energy
I mean,
guy.
yes, that's he's always been the spark. But Jeff, in 2018, wrote. He just sat down. He likes to use the term. He didn't write it, but he channeled like this, about an hours worth of music.
Right.
Um, and then in 2020, he did that again. He sat down with had this awesome, writing session, and that was like, okay, there's really no excuses, like I said, with COVID happening, because we had like the foundation of an entire record. I mean, like, he did it, he sat there and demoed up, guitar, bass, drums, all of it, like insert solo here. I mean, it was like ready to go. Now, granted, once we all came in, we took what he had written and grew it into what it is. But I mean, there was, it was the entire foundation for a record.
Right.
And so I would have to say, that, between CT's never, his never ending spirit of, let's go. And then with Jeff's, him essentially handing us all a record. I mean, it was kind of a no brainer for us. Um,
When Jeff
and
does that, does he send? Now, I think I read that you guys got pretty adept at sending files back and forth. So that means you're kind of immersing yourself in the digital world a little bit more than maybe you had in the '90s. Probably, I would imagine,
yeah.
to some extent. Was that a learning curve for everybody, or had everybody sort of been kind of doing it as the technology was
I mean,
accruing?
yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, everybody, like, we're not dinosaurs, we evolve. But that's there's no substitute for us all getting together and playing, so I mean, so while we started like messing around with file sharing and stuff, that was just like an introduction. That was more of like for inspiration. It's like,
Hmm.
you and I think that was, and mostly that was between Jeff and John, them sharing, the music back and forth. I'm lucky I was able to, witness most of the album being the foundation of it being written on an acoustic guitar. But but Jeff worked really closely with John as far as like sharing the music back and forth, and things like that.
Um, John, so you're back. Let's see if we can make this happen again. So,
Yeah,
so you're
sorry
in a death
about that.
metal band. You're kind of confronted by CT's insanity slash genius, right? And like musical genius, and you're kind of digging this. But then how do you end up coming into the band then?
So Little Rock and Nashville, pretty decent little, maybe 4.5, 5.5 hour day. And so Wake would come to Little Rock to play shows, and then my death metal band. Once we did that show with Wake, CT booked our first ever out of state show at that time. So
Okay.
I was back down there for shows, and then they would come up here. And so every time they were in Nashville, I would go see them. And then in around 2008, 2009, I joined Today Is the Day as their bassist,
Oh
and
yeah,
we did a big tour together. And it was a long tour for Today's the Day, but the last like 7 to 10 days, Wake was main support. And so at that
yeah.
point, I'd already known everybody and we were already good buddies. But at that point, touring with them, like we became family. It was like we just connected so hard. Every night I was hanging out with them, with the Wake crew,
I got you.
and so it was
Just that
about
chemistry.
maybe that chemistry was just a lock at that point. And so about a year or so later, Reed, the bassist, I was bass for Today's the Day at that time, and that was the
Mhm.
first time I had played bass, but in a band on touring. But they needed someone to fill in for Reed for a European tour, and they thought of me and gave me a shout. And I was still in the Middle Tennessee area at the time, and I was so stoked. I was so excited because
Oh, cool.
uh, that the music, was always there within me. When I heard them for the first time and followed it, it was something special for me. I always felt it was more of a ritualistic religious experience as far as the music's concerned. And you mentioned sludge earlier, and then sludge isn't the first word that comes to mind for me, um, really, as much as it does for some people. But it's just uh, it's just good music,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
anything can be pigeonholed, but to me, it's
the
just
one
good
thing that
music.
jumped out at me from the new album is, and I, as a, I'm not a music critic. I'm a music fan. Okay, but oh, what happened there? I got balloons going everywhere. I got this new Mac. I have no idea what the hell's going on with it. But anyway, um, I
I
hear,
love that you have no idea where those balloons came from.
I have no clue. They just came out of the cosmos. So maybe it was a wake sort of thing. I don't know. Um, and by the way, guys, where are you at time wise? Do you have another one in 5 minutes?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay. Do you have
I'm
like
good right now.
10, 15 minutes? Okay.
Sure.
Um, so I guess the first thing I kind of connected with was there is a shamanistic sort of vibe to some of the music because of the sort of the light and shade of it, the ebb and flow of it. Um, but I definitely heard, particularly in some of the riffage, I heard some Mastodon vibes, little bit of Mastodon vibes in some of it where it's not just bar chords. There's some, you know, some cool arpeggiated things going on. That's really cool. And then you have like the samples and the keyboards that come in, which add the more of the, I guess you maybe want to call it the shamanistic sort of ambient sort of vibe to it too. But then you have the juxtaposition of the two vocals. So you know, you're a hard one to categorize, like because when I think of sludge, I think of I hate God or thou or something like that. And it's not
Mhm.
usually in my wheelhouse for the most part. I like some of it, but it's not something I'm going to actively pursue as much as I might progressive metal or death metal. Which, by the way, John, what was your death metal band from Nashville of all places?
Denial of Grace.
Denial of Grace. Okay, hate to say I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. We had like an EP. That was about it.
How is the local scenes both? I mean, you guys are playing in Nashville in a couple days, right?
Yeah.
Like this weekend, is it?
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
Um, what's the scene like for music like this in that city? I mean, because we typically think of Nashville as like a country and western town, but there's a lot of mega rock stars and mega metal dudes that live there now. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, in the 90s and like the early 2000s, Little Rock and Nashville had huge metal scene. And tons of like really great bands that came out of Nashville. And there's a ton of really good bands out of Little Rock that, that will just never get to see the light of day. Uh, but just because no one's heard of them doesn't mean that they're not, absolutely amazing.
Of course.
But like I was saying, as far as the Little Rock scene goes, we've always been very fortunate, that there was always a good music scene. Especially when we were first coming up and stuff in like the late 90s and the early 2000s. And that's what bred bands like Paul Bear, like they grew up listening to us.
Yeah,
um
true.
and you speak of like Macedon, it's like they played some of their first shows with us, to with
No
like
shit.
crowds of like, yeah, with like crowds of like 15 people,
That's crazy. That's
and
awesome. Yeah,
they're we consider them family. But so because it is such, even though in the South, it is a lot of small towns, so everybody kind of knows everybody, especially when us, for us older crowd, because there was it was limited. While I say we had access to these killer scenes, it was still very limited in the extent that we
sure.
all knew each other across states and stuff.
Yeah,
uh
it's not like you're living near Philadelphia and New York and Baltimore where there's this
right.
massive, 3 hour, bands traveling up and down that East Coast circuit. You don't
Right.
probably have something quite like that, I would imagine. But
Right.
what let's pull up the let's talk about the new album. And I'm gonna pull up, obviously I don't have a copy of it yet. Is that it right there? Hold on one sec here, guys. So we'll pull that up, and there is the artwork.
Mhm.
You want to speak a little bit to that, guys? Like, is this? I didn't have any liner notes, so is that something you did, Brittany, or is that something that you had an
Yeah,
artist,
so we
local
worked
artist?
with a yeah, we worked with a local artist. We CT had been working with this local jewelry artist on having her make us some jewelry.
Hmm.
And then when it started coming up, with album artwork ideas, he threw her name around, and I was like, he was like, "What do you think about using Lonnie?" And I was like, "I think that's an amazing idea." The way that she crafts her jewelry, and then the way that she would display it, it was always very very inspiring. So we started kind of working together on that. there was a lot of hits and misses. It was completely outside of her comfort zone. So it took a while, to kind of, to relax and kind of understand like the vision of what we were going for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Me and her are both avid backpackers.
Oh, nice.
So we went on a, trip. We happened to have like our both of our favorite place to go backpacking is in the Ozarks at this one specific place
Oh,
called
really? Okay.
Richland Creek, and we kind of bonded over that. We're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe.
Nice.
And so we went on a backpacking vision quest, if you will. And then when we came back, it was like we were just totally in sync. And So she started, putting it all together. I mean, I helped with some elements, but I would say most of the credit goes to her. But that was all, everything in that record was all like handmade, ethically sourced. Every stick was hand placed. Every piece of sand was, placed by hand.
Right.
Uh, and Overall, we wanted to create something that was real and photograph it. That was
Mm-hmm.
really important to us. And I think the artwork and the album, I mean, I think they perfectly complement each other. I mean, you've got like these, like elements of death, and then you have like this, hauntingly beautiful, delicately soft, it's all at the same time. And I think that that's a good way to summarize our music too. Uh, because at the end of the day, you know all if everything we do, we just it all comes from the earth. I mean, the artwork, the music, they're all born from the earth, shaped by its rhythms, textures, and spirit. And I think that really comes across in the music and with the artwork. And I love that we were able to pull that off.
What I noticed on earlier album, at least one album, I think two, the moth is sort of an ever present sort of emblem. What's that symbolize to you guys?
So, I mean, it started off as just our logo from all the way back to like the early 2000s, late 90s. It was just part of it. We used it
Okay.
for our logo, and it's just always kind of been there as, as as a piece of us.
Symbolism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. I don't know if you've
so
ever been to the South, but the cicadas are insane.
yes, I have. I lived in Houston, Texas for 5 years.
Yeah. I
And
remember
as
the
I
first,
told you, I've only been to Arkansas once, and it wasn't. Don't take this the wrong way. It wasn't
yeah.
on purpose. I was
Right.
I was in
Yeah.
Nashville. I went to Nashville. My daughter's in Nashville, and I've been in Nashville many times. I love that city. It's super cool. But I happen to be a long-suffering Tennessee Titans fan. And
Oh.
when they went to the I think it was the AFC Championship game in 2009 against
Yeah.
the Baltimore Ravens. My kid and I drove down, and after the game, it was a game we got ripped off of. I'm just gonna say it straight up. We got fucked in that game. Pardon my language, but anyways, well, I left, and it was my first time to Nashville, and I got my directions screwed up. I thought I was supposed to be going to Memphis. Yeah, I know. Memphis is on the west, not the east, but I didn't realize it until I was literally I'm seeing signs for Arkansas. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then this was back in the day before these guys. This was when I had a flip
Right.
phone. So we're going by maps, and my kid was sick with the flu even before we went down, and he was not much help because he was sleeping most of the way. So I'm just cruising along, and suddenly the next thing I know, I'm in Arkansas basically, and I'm like, what the hell happened here? What? And all I could think of was, like I was thinking of like what's the movie? It was done in Georgia, but I was thinking of what
Deliverance.
I was thinking of Deliverance. I know it's so, categorically stupid because that's not what it's like in those states. But I'm like, man, I'm gonna get lost on some country road out here, and they're never gonna find us again.
Well, I mean, and that's true now. I mean, once you get outside the metro, I mean, there's literally,
Pretty
for the
backwoodsy.
yeah, when you live in the Ozarks, I mean, you're literally, if you didn't get the farmland hundreds
Yeah.
of years ago, if your ancestors weren't lucky enough to steal some farmland from the natives, You're literally a rock farmer. Like, I'm not
Uh,
even joking. Like, that's the
yeah.
only way to make a living is selling rocks. That's
Wow.
like, that's it,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but but I think that's also what, what drives a lot of people in Arkansas to go and do more.
Let's talk about the new album real quickly here. I think the cool thing about this album is there isn't like a high point. It's pretty consistent throughout. I think it gets off to a great start with the first track, and I just closed my window and I can't remember the names of the tracks. I'm sorry. I apologize. The first track is he
Y-
follows.
Yeah, you swore we'd always be together.
You swore we'd always be together. Wasn't even close there. Very, very cool track. And this is when I immerse myself in that track, I'm like, okay, this isn't like sludge like I would have thought it was going to be. It's very, dare I use the word progressive in many ways.
That's the only term that I would use to describe our music personally. But
Yeah, I mean, you can hear elements of the 70s in there. You can hear elements of metal, but it's not like, it's definitely not hair metal. It's definitely not like, traditional like Sabotage or something like that. It's very unfurling is a word I would use. Like it just kind of slowly develops and lays itself out to you. And there are these kind of peaks and valleys.
yeah, dynamics are very important to us.
Great word. Thank you. Thank you. My cold is affecting my verbiage here, but that's a great word
Right.
for it too. Dynamic. When you're writing these, you said that primarily, I guess Jeff wrote most of the stuff.
Yeah, he laid down the foundation for all of it,
Okay.
and then we kind of grew it into what it is.
Yeah. How's that
Jeff,
work then? Does he bring
well,
in fully fleshed out demos, or does he just give you a thumbnail sketch of everything with chords and maybe a
I
basic
mean,
program beats or something, and then you
well,
kind of
for this record, he literally demoed it out, and
okay.
then and then we we all added, we just kind of grew it into what it is, uh, for this particular album. Uh, John, he worked, really closely with John too on like a lot of, growing and building these layers and changing it to what it is now, So, uh, I mean, so yeah, it started off, with Jeff with that foundation, but then we all just contributed in our own ways to get it to where it is now.
John, are you you said that the band Today Is the Day, that was the first time you'd played bass for a band, I guess, live.
Hmm.
So I assume you're like me. You're a guitar player that dabbles in bass, or maybe, or you do it
Yeah.
out of expediency for what the band needs, right? So you're probably primarily a guitar player. Is that how you kind of help flesh these songs out then?
Well, I'm back on guitar with Wake now,
Oh, you are back
and
on guitar. Okay.
yeah, when the reason I joined Today's the Day on bass was pretty much if Steve Austin from Today's the Day says, "Hey, do you want to play bass on tour with me?" I'm like, "Oh, yes." I don't own a bass. I don't own any gear, but let's go.
Right.
It's like there at the time I had done some touring, but I hadn't done anything in that breadth. But it's like in Nashville, pretty much a musician in Nashville is like, whatever I got to do to get on the bus, whatever I got to do to get in the van, in the tour, whatever it is, let's just do it. And so when we had done those shows with Wake, and then they needed someone to fill in for Reed while he was going to be with his newborn, it was another like, yes, absolutely. Let's do this. But I was always kind of just holding the spot for Reed. I knew he would be back at some point, and and when he did come back, I was like, I'll be the third guitarist if I have to be with Wake, like whatever it takes to continue being in the band and putting my ears and hands on the music. And Jeff originally is a bass player too. So he's the drummer in the band, and is the mind behind a lot of the songs mostly, but the whole thing has been um, him giving us the meat, the bones, and us starting to flesh it out. And being a guitarist, always having a melody in my ears and in my head, always looking for a spot to put in something that's catchy and can continue a thread from the beginning to the end of the song that makes the song seem like one big piece instead of chopped up into multiple things. Even though there might be different moods and moves, you can find a melody in anywhere and keep yourself interested, and therefore make the song feel like it flows as one piece all the way
Yeah,
through the album, you know?
that's a good point to bring up. There's a lot of melody on this album, which was,
Mhm.
I think, the thing that struck me as sort of surprising, because when I see the term sludge, I think, well, that's going to be a lot of chuggy sort of, sort of detuned, not necessarily not musical, but just less musical than, say, what I was expecting. And that was the cool part that made me go, oh, you know what, Liz? I want to talk to these guys. This is actually a really, really cool, a cool album.
Yeah, and
The reason
I'm not real sure, sorry to interject, but I'm not real sure how that term just kind of like got
I was
how it
wondering
gets
about that.
stuck with us.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. While we do have some super heavy, massive riffs, it's all part of dynamics. It's like when it's the build up to, that when you take something that's so heavy like that, sandwiched in between, like an acoustic guitar,
Hmm.
it makes the acoustic guitar 10 times softer, and it makes the heavier riff 10 times heavier. So our use of heavy riffs is all in the, in for dynamic's sake.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not real sure how we got stuck with that title. Nothing against it whatsoever, but I definitely wouldn't use it to describe us.
Yeah. I want to apologize for not being up on the band's, like, the core group members of the band, but here's what I was working with. Unfortunately, I was working with Metallum, right? Metal
Mhm.
Archives, and John, you're the bass player still,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like
and
we need
Oh,
to
yeah.
update
and I
that.
guess Kiffin is no
Yeah.
longer with the band,
No,
and
no, he's
neither
not.
is
Kiffin was great. Kiffin was always, I mean, I love him to death. But yeah, he's no longer.
Chris, or Chris Graves.
No, no,
Okay.
he's not.
Yeah, so my apologies for seemingly coming off kind of stupid with the
Nah,
membership
that's all
of the
right.
band, but that's just kind of, I can only go so far when I don't actually own an album in front of me. So,
No,
um,
it's okay. It's a
so uh-oh,
first record I've played
right,
on in general. I was just a live bassist on a couple of recordings and stuff, and so yeah, totally
right.
understandable.
Were you on the live album, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, which is the one thing that you guys did do, a Stone, a Leaf, an Unfound Door. Where was that recorded at? Was that like a Roadburn thing, or?
It's Maryland Death Fest.
Oh, you were at Maryland Death Fest. Oh,
Yeah.
when was
Hmm.
that was in 15?
Yeah. That was
No,
no,
I
no,
think
it
it,
was before that. My
Oh,
baby was like 8 months old.
I think it was like
And I had
oh,
her at the
okay.
2013 or
beginning of,
12.
yeah,
Oh,
it
so
was
it was
the
It
end,
was
it was
released. It was
2012 for
released.
sure.
It
gotcha,
was released in
gotcha. Okay.
15, I think, with a accompanying DVD as well.
Yeah.
Is that the only time you guys have played MDF, or have you been there before?
I think that was the only
That's
time
it.
I can remember. Yeah.
I live about an hour from Baltimore, like a straight shot from my door to where the MDF is at. There, it's 1 hour, like
Oh
literally
wow,
to the minute. So I go down to a
nice.
lot of shows in Baltimore. Yeah, it's kind of nice, actually. I don't. If I
Hmm.
want to go down just for the day, I can go down for the day and come back. But I actually did the whole fest this last year. It was because the lineup was just absolutely insane. I think only maybe 22 or 23. I can't. Whatever, they took a year off. 23, I think it was the year they took off. 22 was crazy insane too. But I mean, I just couldn't not see bands like Dismember and Forbidden and Agalock. I'm good buddies with the guys in Agalock, so it was like I got to go see them. That's probably a great place for you guys to go. I hope you get another shot at going now that you're kind of reactivated a little bit. Well, on that front, the touring front, like, how easy could it or would it be for you guys to now go? I'm assuming you're probably not a band that's interested in doing long, arduous van tours anymore around the states or anything like that. But maybe you are. I don't know. But you all have kids, so I know that's probably a dynamic that plays a lot into this thing. But what's you got 4 dates coming up, right? You want to mention those, Brittany?
Yeah, so we've got on the 14th we'll be playing Nashville. at Eastside Bowl, March 14th, and then March 15th, we're doing Little Rock, Arkansas. And then we've got one more weekend planned right now, April 11th in Shreveport, and then April 12th at New Orleans. That's the only thing that we have on the books right now.
I got to get my buddy Logan out. He's in New Orleans now. I'm sure he knows about you guys. I got to get him to come out to the show. Could you foresee doing any kind of more extensive touring, or is that really something to sort of be revealed as time goes on?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not easy for the six of us to do that.
Yeah,
Like me, Jeff, John, Reed, we're all travelers. We all stay traveling.
yeah.
But it's not easy for, one of the other members of the band to travel. But while so we don't see like long tours in our near future. So if we're playing anywhere near someone's hometown and that's drivable, I would make the drive, because I'm not sure when we'll be back through. But at the end of the day, everything just has to line up and work. So while we'll take all offers, it just everything has to line up to make it where we're able to do it.
I wanted to also bring up too, real quick, and then we'll wrap up here. The title track. You guys did a killer video for that, man. That video is very effective. Obviously, fire is awesome unless you're like
Right.
in a house fire. Then it's really unawesome. But I mean, like otherwise, fire is fucking cool, right?
Yeah.
And the way that you guys do this is honestly, I'm like looking at it going, man, like that's some serious shit there. You guys had like a major fire going on, right?
We probably burned, and I'm not even kidding, at least 50 down trees, because not only when we filmed that, there was 15-mile-an-hour winds. So,
Yeah,
we had a
you could see the
yeah,
wind blowing. I'm like thinking,
yeah.
Christ, this is like a fire marshal's nightmare. This thing right here.
Yeah, so and there had been a burn ban actually in effect. I mean, that's like one of the, things in Arkansas, it doesn't, I mean, that's literally, we filmed that literally like 20 minutes from my house, and I live out right outside the metro. But that's one of the cool things about Arkansas is you can make it, a 25-foot fire and get away with it. But yeah, with 15-mile-an-hour winds, what we had imagined as this 15 feet high of fire, turned into you know, a 6 foot high fire that was blowing like crazy.
Nick
But
says safety third, not second.
yeah.
That's about right.
Well, when we made that video, I mean, we really fought all the elements. So there'd been a burn ban in effect for like over a month. And then it was lifted, but it was lifted because of torrential downpour,
Oh, so it was wet.
storms.
Okay.
So yeah, so everything was wet, and then that here comes the rain. So we literally fought like wind, rain, fire ants, you name it. But we're super proud of that video because we did that all ourselves.
Yeah,
Like
and that's a 12-minute song, I
yeah.
believe. And I what I kind of get out of it is, you brought up the shamanistic term, a ritualistic sort of vibe to it. It has that eyes wide shut evilness to it in a weird way, if you get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
That scene where they're all around in the masks and everything. It's got that vibe to it, but with lots of fire. So it's
Yeah.
like, but it's cool. Like, was there a narrative to a storyboarded narrative to the thing, or was it just like, hey guys, let's get some wicked, deer heads and costumes and just, and then of course there's the obligatory obvious, the jamming parts, which are cool though. They look great because there's fire everywhere. So it's, or was
So I
that
mean,
an
there was.
homage to Slayer in some weird way? I don't know.
I mean, there was a lot of like ideas thrown around and stuff like that. But we just let kind of the scene kind of dictate the story. So I filmed a lot of that, everything except for the fire scene itself. Me and the person who helped work on the artwork, Lonnie, and another friend of ours, we just went out to the Ozarks and just let kind of like the scene tell its own story, and um, so we no, we didn't have like an exact, idea in mind as far as, everything goes, but I think it all came together really well. And when we pitched, a director for doing the fire shoot, like it took us pitching a couple of directors because they're like, what? You know, you're
Oh
trying to
yeah.
do what for a how long of a song? Like, you know, that's insane. And you know, because we're like, the only lights that can be used are the ones from the fire. You can't bring in any lighting, you know, and so most
Wow.
people were like, "Oh, that sounds like a nightmare."
Yeah.
But then we pitched, you know, Jonathan, who ended up doing the fire scenes for us, you know, and he was like, "That sounds incredibly awesome." You know, he was just like, he just jumped right on it. He got the vision and he liked the idea of it being so challenging for him. You know, the us like he's like, so I can't use any lights, and we're like, no, you literally cannot use any lights. You know,
Wow.
and I
I
think
didn't
it all
even
turned out
I didn't
really
even
well.
actually take note of that, but now that you mention it, now it sticks out to me. It's like, oh yeah, there's no, you can tell it's not a Hollywood sort of vibe at all to it. It's very esoteric and natural. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I mean,
And
and that's
zero.
exactly what the record, yeah, that's exactly what the record is, you know, the music is, that's what the art is, and then we were able to pull it all off with the video, and it all being so authentic to us, you know, while you've got all these elements that, you know, that every, you know, fire, of course, you know, like if you were to just try to explain that to somebody, it can come across as really cheesy, you know,
Right. Yeah.
but you know, we were able to pull it off, I think really well, you know,
No, it's
uh,
cool. It's
and it all,
it's
yeah.
very visually captivating. It really kind of drags you in because the visuals really fit the music, the dynamic of the music. They really it kind of undulates like the music does because that song's it's long, but it doesn't really feel long. It just kind of flows, and the video really matches up to it. And I only watched that this morning, and I was like, holy shit, this is pretty badass. This is
Well,
killer.
and a lot of, you know, like even members of the band was like, you know, like how, you know, when, you know, pitching the ideas of, you know, the video, they're like, you know, like it's going to be really hard to keep people's attention, you know, for 12 minutes. And you're like, well, the music does that, you know,
Hmm.
you know, the music does it and the visuals are just like the icing on the cake for it, you know? And I think the whole record really goes by super fast like that, where, you know,
It does.
it's, you know, you know, when you've got, you know, 12, 15-minute long songs, you know, but you put the record on and then you just kind of look up and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe an hour just passed, you know. I think you know, while our songs are really long, there's so much and there's so many different genres all, you know, compacted into that, you know, amount of time that it allows, you know, I think people's attention spans have changed
Big
over
time,
time.
huge.
And so what was really, I think it was hard for people to kind of wrap their head around what we were trying to do, you know, over a decade ago. But I think with, you know, with the scroll generations and stuff like that, I think it's really come to, you know, to our advantage now, you know, where it sounds crazy, you know, if you say people's, you know, attention spans are so short, but they actually are able to listen to a 15-minute song just because it's so diverse and it changes so much, you know.
Right. That's the key. If it's a not to denigrate any bands, but one of my favorite bands does kind of beat some riffs to death, and that's Boris. But Boris does 9 million different types of things. They might put out 15 albums that are completely different from one another, but they do have some of that sort of the drony stuff that kind of just gets very monotonous, but it gets hypnotic. But I think another word that really kind of fits this album, now that I think about it, and stepping back and talking to you guys, is it's very cinematic. There's a
Mhm.
there's a cinematic quality. Again, it never goes super high and super low, but there's an undulation to the material, and it's very cool. Brittany, real quick, last thing I wanted to ask you is how are your vocals processed much? You don't have to tell
No,
the truth,
none at
but
all.
that's you live.
That's yes, that's me live. None at
How
all.
the hell do you do
Yeah.
that, man? How do you
Uh
not destroy your throat? I
no,
always ask this of people that are harsh screamers because I've tried and I just can't do it. I have much more like a Lane Staley voice. Can't go
yeah.
out of that realm. I've tried to do the and I just I can't talk 2 hours later
Yeah.
if I try to do it. How do you do that and not roach your throat, so to speak?
Well, I mean, that's like, you know, 20, 30 years of practice. But yeah, when we were recording, it was like, you know, yeah, I think Sanford had, you know, originally tried to put, you know, like I'm like, do not put my vocals have so much gain in them. Like you do not have to put anything on them at all.
Well,
It's
here
like,
a quick question here, a quick interruption. Because you hadn't sung a lot in the last
Mhm.
several years, because you haven't exercised that muscle, and
Yeah.
it's a muscle, obviously. Though a lot of
Yeah.
muscles, actually, your diaphragm, your throat, the
Mhm.
actual voice box. Was it? Did you have any trepidation? Did you have any fear that you weren't going to be able to maybe connect with that again, or be able to pull that off again live
Well,
in the
oh,
studio?
I mean, and well, to be perfectly honest, it usually takes like one day, like even when like, we're marathon practicing right now, everybody's in town. So we're marathon practicing for these shows.
Hmm.
The first day is, just pretty much just stretching out your vocal cords. And then after that, everything just locks in.
So it wasn't a huge problem for you then.
No, I wouldn't
Okay.
say no.
And how's the rehearsals going? Everybody locking in?
No, it's amazing. I think one of the it's so sad for us that that like John lives on the other side of the country, but I think the shining light to that is when he's able to come down, we're all just so happy to all be together in the same room and playing music.
That's
It
super
creates the
cool.
most positive, creative,
That's awesome.
experience that that it makes it where we don't take anybody's time for granted. We appreciate every member and the amount of time and effort that they put into being there. And that comes from us, being so far apart usually. That yeah, like that we're just. It really does create such a positive and creative environment. When we all get together like that, because while our music is so serious and stuff, there's nothing that we love more than to sit around and just laugh, till we're crying and stuff.
I'm sure.
That's kind of
Yeah.
the problem, like when that's the only problem when John comes, he stays at our house and we stay up too late laughing.
Laughing and tuning out and maybe having a
Yeah.
drink or two here. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny you guys mentioned like when you were in your 20s and stuff like that. I know when I was doing that stuff many years ago, a lot of it was too much about the partying at one point in time. It was always about, well, let's bang some tunes out and get drunk and all that kind of stuff. I imagine as adults now, like real adults, right? Where you have real lives and jobs and kids and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff just not nearly as important, and it's all about the creative process and making that the best it can possibly be, right?
Yeah, and John was just talking about that in one of the other interviews that we did. He was really elaborating on that.
Yeah, the ability to focus on, it's not like, oh, a 15-minute beer run turns into like a 2-hour hang out and sit outside on the porch and drink. It's like, yeah, in your
Right.
20s that you can get away with that because guess what? We're practicing tomorrow and then we're practicing on
Yeah,
Sunday and
and you're
he-
recovering a hell of a lot faster in your 20s than you are
right,
in your
right,
50s, man.
exactly.
It's like
And you
brutal
and you
now,
don't
right?
have a kid that you have to go pick up from school or
Right.
take to school at 7 a.m. the next morning. So, you start to, we say this a million times, just appreciate each other so much more, appreciate our time, appreciate our the commitments that we've made, appreciate the commitments we make to our families as well. You got to
Sure.
appreciate
Yeah, yeah.
those from each other, because you see that and you go, well, I see this person really is taking care of their shit at home, so when they're here we need to make sure that we take care of their shit here. So I've always, when I was in Nashville, I would drive 4 or 5 hours to get to Little Rock, and so
Yeah,
now,
that's a trek. Yeah.
yeah, you trade a 5 hour drive to now like a 7 to 8 hour flight for me. And so when I land, I get scooped up and there's a meal waiting for me. I got a fresh bed. I've got, it's just kind of like a little bit of a vacation in a way, but I'm still, but we get down to it. Practices at this time, everybody shows up ready to go. Got their stuff together. Yeah, it's definitely a really nice place to kind of start from. It's a good landing base for me and for the entire band, for us to continue every time I come down to kind of like we pick up where we left off.
Awesome. I note too, real quick, and then we'll wrap here. John, are you in a rehearsal hall now, or what? What you got gear everywhere behind you there?
So yeah, it's funny. I'm at Brittany's house right now. Like, so I flew in from Miami yesterday, red eye flight, and we jammed a little bit last night. But yeah, I'm at the jam jam
The
space.
jam space. Okay.
And I work remotely, so I'm able to work from anywhere, and then take a step off and do this, interviews, and then when everyone's done for the day, it's time to jam. So yeah, this is the jam room.
And Brittany, I see you in your office clearly because you got one of them
Yeah.
office type phones there going on. So,
Yeah.
you guys, first
Yeah.
of all, I want to thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. I'm not very good in the 25-minute, promo type interview. It's just not how I roll. So I appreciate that. Um, thanks for giving me this time. Much success on the album. Much success on the gigs that are coming up. Hopefully, there's maybe some East Coast stuff. Maybe at some point in time when maybe you can put a small run together or something like that. That would be super cool. And yeah, it's a great album. Let's once again, The Return of Magic is the name of the album. It's the first album in about 13 years. Am I right on that?
14. Yeah.
14 years. Okay.
Yeah. It was,
Terrible at math. I was an
well, it was
account.
13 years when we recorded it, but now it's 14.
Oh, well, now it's 14. Yeah, it was 13 last year. Right.
Yeah.
What's funny is I'm a college graduate and my degree is in accounting, and I'm the worst math guy in the world. So figure that one out. I retired from doing accounting a long time ago, but yeah, that comes out March 14th, this Friday, on Relapse. I believe there's going to be digital, obviously, but I believe there's going to be CD and vinyl, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's multiple variations. I think one of the variations of vinyl, the colored vinyl, is already sold out, but there's still 2 variations left.
Cool. Just to let you know, I generally have a whole description write up with links and everything. I didn't get that done in time for this, but I will when we're finished here. I'll go populate that with links to the video, links to your Facebook, to your band. Yeah, Bandcamp. I'm assuming.
Mhm.
Yeah. And did Liz not send you the PR, like the press release for any of it?
She sent me some stuff. I typically
Okay.
don't. I typically do my own sort of thing that I post
Okay.
into the description, and then so that people can access the links to check out all your socials and all that kind of stuff. I think you have an Instagram. You do have an Instagram.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't typically put member Instagrams up unless they ask me to do or something like that. So, but yeah, and then of course Relapse. Anybody that's into metal probably has that as one of their tabs they have saved. So they spend lots of money there. I know I have in the past and in the future. I'm sure I will. And I'm going to definitely pick up a copy of this. Again, Thralls of Metal. If you don't know Thralls, check out Thralls of Metal. Nick is up in the Toledo, Ohio area. He does super thorough deep dives on every album. He and his partner John, they generally do a review a day, which is way more work than I ever want to do for this because
Great.
it's a lot of work to do that kind of stuff, believe it or not. And so he's going to be doing the album soon. Yeah, Detroit, Cleveland, he's in that area for shows. So if you guys ever get up that way, I'm sure he'll make it out.
And
So
I would,
Awesome.
when you're doing the links, if you would, in order to like, our own online store is Wake Bandcamp, or excuse me, I'm so sorry, Big Cartel, Wake Big Cartel. If you Google it, you can get the link. So if you're
yeah,
putting the links up, we'd appreciate that, and then
I
that
did
way
see that. Directly
it'll
hit you guys.
directly support us. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. Any last things you want to drop out there at all for anyone?
No,
Man,
just
thank
thank
you
you
for
for
your
having
time.
us. We
Yeah,
really
Yeah.
man.
appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Again, sorry I commandeered you for an hour, but that's kind of how I roll. So Liz knows that. I don't think she'd throw anybody that isn't kind of aware that I'm not generally a 30-minute guy. But I appreciate you guys giving me a lot of extra time. So, all
Well,
right.
you've heard
All
our
right.
record.
Thanks.
We're not 30-minute people either. So
That's true. That's a good point. I was just gonna say our interview lasted about as long as your album does, so that's
Yeah.
cool. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I think you guys know we're probably all close in age. There was a period there in the late '90s and early 2000s where every band felt they had to put 80 minutes into an album.
Yeah.
I find I don't go back to a lot of those anymore because it's just too much. Because sometimes a lot of it, the extra stuff is like, all right, there's 30 minutes that could have been pared down here. And Brittany, you brought it up. Really, I am a classic example of the ADHD as I get older guy,
Mhm.
where it's scary sometimes how I can't, Bandcamp, YouTube. I'm down this rabbit hole and down that rabbit hole. It's like, oh, I'll go back to that and finish that album. And then I look and I've got 15 tabs up of,
Yeah.
different albums I'm listening to. I don't know if that's really a good thing. I don't think it is sometimes. So that's the bad side of technology. But these songs are immersive. They're cool. I was able to do that with your album 3 times through, and I enjoyed every. They all seem to unlock new pieces when I hear them, which is that's a mark of a really good album. So,
Yeah.
Thank you,
That's
man.
awesome.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
all right, guys, you have a good night, okay? And thank you so much for joining me today. All right.